Welcome to another episode of What's Up in Archaeology. Today I'm going to talk about the Natufian culture, specifically the Natufians. Now, who were the Natufians? Well, if you remember a little while back, I did a video, I did two videos on Gobekli Tepe. I have linked them in the description. If you guys want to go back and have a look at what I talked about, then Gobekli Tepe. We are basically talking about the same people. Now, who are the Natufian cultural peoples? Well, they are basically hunter-gatherers that have that lived in the Middle East, more or less Western Asia, and they belong to the now Neolithic period, which is the New Stone Age. I'm just going to do a really brief summation of what the Neolithic entails, because the Neolithic led to the invention of agriculture. That is the most important aspect of the Neolithic. Until the discovery of metals, then we got new designations for the ages, for the eras. But until then, they were Neolithic, New Stone Age. They used stone tools, but at some point in time, they discovered agriculture, which is for another future episode. Today, we're just going to talk about the new Neolithic people, and more specifically, the pre-pottery Neolithic peoples, because the Neolithic period was divided into two periods: the pottery stage, even before agriculture. They were the Natufian B culture, and the Natufian A were the pre-pottery Neolithic peoples. So they lived around. I'll just start sharing the screen, because it's a good way to show you guys what I mean. They lived in this part of the world, more or less where today Syria, Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon, more or less. Why is this area more very important? Because it falls into the Fertile Crescent. And the Fertile Crescent is where theoretically where it's been suggested by early archaeologists like V. Gordon Child and Binford. I keep forgetting his first name, but Binford. They devised the name of the Fertile Crescent and the agricultural revolution which came out of this area. It is basically where animals and humans congregated in such a small area that was just teeming with life, and they later on developed agriculture. So this is the Fertile Crescent, which I'm going to get rid of now, and we are basically concentrating on this culture, the Natufian culture, and they had a lot of characteristics. One of them was they polished hand axes. Another one was smaller tools, smaller blades. Another one which they concentrated on certain animals. We know from archaeological excavations of Natufian sites that they concentrated on sheep and goats, more or less. Of course, they also obviously hunted other animals, and they fished, and they procured vegetable foods like wild grains, which would later be domesticated, and other sort of other forms of nutrition. Now, I'm going to go into the article itself. And and it is this one. Just make it an F11, so it's better to see. Davey asked me who were the Levantine hunter-gatherers. Well, I showed you the map. The Levantine area, the Levant, is what is now Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Israel. That's the Levant, the Levantine hunter-gatherers. So they were from that area. Hope that answers your question. Now, I can't use many words because my last video was demonetized, and I think I know why. It's the act of putting people into, well, I can say graves, so you can get the rest of the graves, because graves is also musical notes, and I can say that. So yeah, good on you, mate. You should. That's what I expect people to also read the article. I'll just give the background and extra information. That's what I do. Now let's read. So this was before the dawn of agriculture, the Near East. I say Western Asia because it's more geographically correct. And it says here they had lived a far more complex and comfortable life than previously thought. No, I've always known that, but I can't prove it. I don't belong to an institution that has resources that these guys have. So the starts off with diners at top tier restaurants often pay extras for items like foraged wild mushrooms. I get foraged wild mushrooms in my garden, so yeah, I'm sort of one of those guys. Dry farmed produce. Yeah, same here. I used to grow potatoes sometimes. Haven't grown them for a year or two, but that's dry farmed produce. Tisanes. Tisanes are teas made of freshly picked herbs. They are infusions. That's a really posh way of saying bloody teas. I think I can say bloody. I hope so. I hope this doesn't get demonetized by saying the BLOODY word. These items have often appear in Berkeley's famous Chez Panis, where downstairs guests can enjoy their meal in a view with a comforting wood fire. That's blasé. That I get that. I go to my mother-in-law's house, and she has a blazing, comfortable wood fire, and she serves all what is on this menu. So it's nothing special, guys. Nothing special. Now, before the dawn of agriculture, in the Near East, Western Asia, some hunter-gatherers surprisingly enjoyed similar comforts. No, now they are comforts because we get supermarket and mass-produced food. Then it was a necessity. A recent years-long excavation of a 14,600 to 12,000-year-old site in Jordan, and this date is very relevant. Take away 2,000 years from these dates, and you get the BC dating method. This is from today. That's before BCE. Now, this dating, 14,600 BC or 12,600, 10,600 BC, is when the Gobekli Tepe monument was being made. You guys can look in the video which I've read, the two videos which I have linked in the description, which I made, and also I have to link Dave Temple's video, which is also very, very good, which I will do as soon as I finish doing this, which is also very good on Gobekli Tepe. Now, these are contemporary. What we're talking about is almost possibly the same types of people, genetically for sure, most likely. And so who knows? We don't know yet, but I'm speculating and with an educated guess. So they unearthed remains of an elaborate stone buildings. See, elaborate stone buildings. A fire pit, artwork. We'll come back to that later. Stone tools and an ample food remains of what appeared to have been a healthy, balanced diet. The original paleo diet, by the way. Now, the site is Shubaika 1. which lies northeast of Amman, capital of Jordan, is described in the Journal of Scientific Reports. I have the link to this journal, to this report, so it's in the description. Be sure to check it out. And the research sheds light not only into the transition from foraging to farming, yes, it does, absolutely, but also on the Natufian culture that lived there during this important time in human history. And it is important because then the the Neolithic period, especially the pre-pottery Neolithic, because as soon as we invented pottery, we had agriculture basically established, because pottery was basically invented to store the grains. So the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, or the Natufian A, were transitioning from hunter-gatherers to farming. And so they concentrated, like I said before, they concentrated on a specific type of animals which were abundant in that area: goats, sheep, possibly aurochs. Of course, aurochs. They were all over Western Eurasia, more or less. Some other types of deer, possibly horses, donkeys, etc. The dog, and which I'll get back to it later if it's mentioned here. It's mentioned in another article which I have linked in the description. No, I haven't, but I might. It's short. It's from Nature, but so it's not. It's this is better. So. That's what the Natufian culture and the Natufian peoples were. They were transitioning to agriculture. They were possibly experimenting with domesticating animals. The bones being found, especially in the early Natufian B period, or the pottery Neolithic B period, or late pre-pottery Neolithic B. There's the pre-pottery Neolithic A and B, which led to the pottery phase. The pre-pottery Neolithic B period was a time when, in many excavated sites, there seems to be a transition of the animals to domestication, because there are a huge amount of male examples of a certain age. You keep if you want to domesticate animals, you keep the females, because they are obviously the where you obtain the offspring, but you kill off the males whose characteristics you don't seem to want. Let's not get political on this question, by the way, guys. That's how it worked. You want a tamed animal, you get the tamest individual, or you try to. It's basic farming, basic breeding. It was done until the middle of the 20th century. That's how you did it. So it's nothing controversial or anything. So the site of the Natufian culture is characterized by the appearance of solid stone buildings. Yes, indeed, some of the earliest in the world. Absolutely correct. Tobias Richter is one of the studying authors, an associate professor of University of Copenhagen. One oval-shaped semi-subterranean Natufian structure at the site featured a flat stone paved floor, maintained the structure's look and functionality. The building lined with fire pit with carefully placed stones. This tells us a lot about the developing culture, because they were steering away from a completely nomadic life, and these more significant structures meant that they were possibly becoming more and more sedentary. So it's not just having the houses that, oh look, it's a stone house, but it's the paved house. The structures were significant. They were maintained. They were substantial in a way that you would not find in nomadic peoples. Nomadic peoples carried light, were light travelers. they carried just the bare essentials. So they could produce a camp with the materials around them, or the wooden materials. They would have carried furs, possibly, etc., furs or something or other, depending on the latitude. And they would be light travelers. But this begins to tell you that it is a more sedentary society. They're becoming much more sedentary. They could have still had nomadic, semi-nomadic lifestyle. Where I live still practices a semi quote-unquote nomadic lifestyle. And I'll just give you a small anecdotal evidence of what my immediate people here do. I live in an area where, because of the actual terrain, the best it is above where my house is at 1,000 meters, by the way, above sea level, and that's intermediate of what the highest point is and what the lowest point is, more or less. Now, the economy of my immediate ancestors, peoples, whatever you want to call it, was pastoral. They had sheep, goats, herds of sheep, goats. They had a couple of working cattle to pull carts, to plow, etc., etc. But because of the best pastoral areas are in areas above 1,100 meters above sea level, and not too long ago, let's say 70 years ago, it used to snow much heavier than it does today. Now you can imagine the fields in the highland area villages, being covered with about a meter of snow or 2 meters of snow for 1 to 2 months, 1.5 months in 2.5 months. Now, how would you feed your large number of head of I'm gonna say cattle, but it's not cows. Herds, the big herds. That's what I was looking for. You couldn't, even with the hay that you would produce during summer. This area where I live is granitic. It's very acidic. It's low fertility rates of the soils. And I do hope this word, the fertility, doesn't cut my monetization. Never mind. It has to be said. The low fertility areas of the area where it's an acidic area. So what my people did, my people, yeah, they're my people, did, were they developed a system of movement where they established other villages. So they had two houses, one house in the upland villages, and then a house in another village in the lowland area, which was below 600, 700 meters above sea level. And the area where they established is not as fertile. It is because of the terrain. It's more very the peaks, the mountains, the folds of the mountain along the valley of our river provides just small areas around the villages for a bit of agriculture and etc. to feed during about 3 months of the year, feeding the cattle, the herds. So they developed this system of movement where between more or less, well, let's say December to March, more or less December to March, they would live in the lowland villages. And then they'd move to the upland villages from March to December. And that's how they live. So this is a similar, very similar analogy. It is not what they did, but it is an analogy that they could have done, because they could have been semi-nomadic, and I think they were semi-nomadic. So yeah, they had substantial houses, and then it was the floor of their housing was paved, so it was substantial, and with a fire pit in the middle, carefully placed stones, etc. They also domesticated the dog as early as 14,000 years ago, which still represents some of the best evidence for early domestication of dog, Richter said. I think I have a video where the Siberians domesticated the dog. There's evidence of the domestication of dog at 22 to 30,000 years. I have to look that up, but I'll put the link to the video as well in the description if you guys want to check it out. By the way, that video has been demonetized. I don't know what I did there, so I've appealed. So yeah. Now, he added that the Natufians were among the first societies to produce art. I don't know what type of art they're talking about, which consists of usually carved bone and stone figures as well as inside stones. They also started to produce large number of grinding, pounding, and pulverizing. This is wrong. I have done enough videos to show you guys that the oldest art form appears to be from H. erectus. Neanderthals have been found to have been doing art at least 70 to 80,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. So the type of art that they're producing is, I don't know, they were among the first societies. No, because we know that there's clay figurines from 32,000 years ago in the Czech Republic. I can't remember the name of the site. My memory is fading on names. So, and we know that the Venus figurines across Europe, Windelhof, I think it's called. We know from Spain the Altamira painted caves, the La Chaux, the Bourgogne area of France, all those limestone caves. Lots of them have art in them. So no, I won't accept this. But they did start to produce large numbers of grinding, pounding, and pulverizing tools. Now, this is again significant because it shows that they were concentrating on grains, which were the steps you need to later on have agriculture. So they were eating a lot of grains because you need grinding, pounding, and pulverizing tools to produce grain, which makes bread, for example, makes gruel, for example. Gruel is just basically boiled mush of grains and possibly vegetables and fats. And if you leave gruel out for a day or two, it ferments, and you know what that produces? I'll leave you guys to figure it out. I won't. I've talked about it. I think me and Sage, me and Tim Sage Cronsell talked about it. There's a video of us talking about what was produced if you ferment water and mush, grainy mush. So here's a picture of an incised fragment of an incised tool from one of the archaeologists. So Rick Tony's team dated more than 20 samples from different layers in Shubeka 1, making it one of the best and more accurate dated Natufian sites in the world. So they actually got really good dates out of it. The dating, directed by Elisabetta Bauretto of Israel's Weizmann's Institute of Science. Another very notable institution for basically archaeology and so on. It involves accelerated mass spectrometry. I need a drink. 1 second. Accelerator mass spectrometry. I can never say that word. Which can reveal the amount of carbon-14 in a small sample down to a single atom. So it's really good, accurate measurements. Based on this and other research, it is now believed that the Natufians lived in what is now Israel, Lebanon, Syria, in addition to Jordan, a region commonly known as the Levant. Mass spectrometer. See, now it came out. Need to get a little bit. No, not going to say the word. Not going to ruin this stream. So yeah. Previously, it was thought that the Natufians first settled in Mount Carmel and Galilee region before later fanning out. The new research suggests that the Natufians instead inhabited a variety of places at about the same time, demonstrating their versatility at adapting to different habitats. Well, of course they were. There's a lot of in that area at that time after the end of the last glacial period, last glaciation. Certain pockets became sort of oases, and that's where you get the Fertile Crescent, because those areas in the Fertile Crescent were very fertile due to the climatic change, basically. There was a lot of water, there was a lot of animals, there was a lot of plants, all concentrated in an area, and the right types of plants: grasses for the grains, small ungulates for hunting and later on domesticating, and some carnivores that you could domesticate into dogs, for example. So the area was just perfect for agriculture to be invented. But before you need to invent it, you need to basically live in that area and hunt and gather until you gradually figure out how to domesticate plants and animals. More or less that. So, interestingly, some of the first modern human migrants out of Africa went to the Levant. Obviously, it was the closest area. It was the corridor. Perhaps attracted by the diverse array of animals and plant life. Yeah, or whatever. Certainly, people today therefore have Natufian ancestry. Yes, we do. But there's another article which is later on shown there that these Western Asian hunter-gatherers seem to have interacted with European hunter-gatherers, the farmers anyway. Later on, same people, Western Asian farmers, interacted romantically with the Western European hunter-gatherers to produce the later on European farmers, etc., etc. But that's for another time. Some genetic traits that we know exist in the Tufian population can also be found in modern European populations and in North Eastern African population, to explain. Yes. The Levant gave rise to the world's three primary monolithic religions. I won't go into that. That's not important. Some have argued that the evidence for the presence of ritual specialists, shamans, or some kind of group leader, what seems clear is that the Natufians have developed a complex symbolic cosmology and treated that word that you guys can read, one say it's DEAD, with respect. Yes, and we see that with Gobekli Tepe as possibly not actually the Natufians, but I will not be surprised. There's no evidence, by the way. I'm just speculating now. My assertions are speculative, and with a very, very educated guess that the Natufians and the peoples that made Gobekli Tepe probably would have been in contact with each other. So it will be, I say it here now, it will or not be proven, and I will or not be vindicated, which is fine by me either way. I'm just speculating, which educated guesses. Where I stand, where I live, where I am, I can't go there and prove my assertions, my hypothesis. But someone will, and I'm hopeful for that. So their diet was equally complex. The remains at Sabeka one, and other Natufian sites show that these people hunted birds, gazelle, and other animals, obviously. Starchy staple appeared to have been other tubers from sea cubrush. I don't know what plant that is. I think that's below here. I think that's the sea cubrush. I don't know this plant. The tubers are fibrous and therefore required flaking and grinding to be palatable, but they reward diners with a pleasant, sweet taste. They say so. I am not. I am no one to contradict them. I've never tasted it, so I take their word for it. In addition to tubers, they relied on a wide range of other wild plants such as cruciferous vegetables, pulses, whatever. There are a lot of some vegetables, wild cereals, and legumes. Richter said, and adding that he and his team are currently writing another paper concerning the Natufian diet, or shall we call it the original paleo diet. That is funny. Sorry about that, guys. So the emerging picture of the Natufian life throws a wrench into popular theory on how agriculture began. No, it doesn't. That actually confirms on how agriculture began. It doesn't throw a wrench. It just makes it, at least when I was studying archaeology, that's what I was taught, that it took a long time, continuously refining and experimentation to get to agriculture. Before that, he had to pass through a phase of hunter-gathering to agriculture, and it took time. So no wrench is being thrown. That's the time. You have to extend it. It's not instant. So no. The theory holds that as populations in the Fertile Crescent, which includes the Levant, grew, why did they grow? A lot of things could have happened. They modified. They were slowly domesticating. If you don't see them in the bones, we sort of see it in the bones, but more in than the pre-pottery Neolithic B. That's when you get the big explosion of various sites that have bones that clearly indicate domestication was trying to appear. Grew their hunter way of life, becoming unsustainable, and they increasingly adopted agriculture. Yes, because agriculture, and especially in this mixed agriculture type society, which they possibly had herds. First of all, the first agriculturalists, quote unquote, were pastoralists. They domesticated animals faster than they domesticated plants because they were low maintenance. Plants are high maintenance, very, very high maintenance, because you had to guard them. You had to become totally sedentary. You cannot move. While with herds, they still do it in that area. They are nomadic. They can go from area to area. So that's when it becomes more and more, when they start becoming more sedentary, when they start adopting actual agriculture of plants, plant agriculture, of course, agriculture plants. That is when they became fixed in areas. But it's, again, pastoralism is low maintenance, while agriculture of plant is high maintenance. You have to water it, possibly. Many of the early agricultural areas were near springs, for example. You had to guard it from animals, from possibly other peoples, from even the hunter-gatherers that still lived in that time, because they were both agriculturalists and pastoralists and hunter-gatherers, all living in the same area during more or less the phase between hunter-gathering and full adoption of agriculture. So yes, and he continued, it's a problem, I won't say that word because it's stupid, to treat a historical outcome as something that is inevitable. Well, it happened. You can't say it's not inevitable. It was inevitable. We did get to that point where they went from hunter-gatherers to agriculturalists, and domestication, more or less. So scientists do not yet know precisely where agriculture first began. It is yes, they sort of do. It's in the Fertile Crescent, so it sort of narrows it down a bit. But there are other independent areas that adapted or invented agriculture by themselves. The Chinese, where China is now, Ganges, the Yellow River type area thing there. The South Americans invented, the Amerindians invented agriculture all by themselves. And I think also the Indus Valley civilization in the Central Asia, the subcontinent, I think. But I'm not sure. I think no, there's only those three areas. I'm quite sure. So, yeah, and the culture initiated this way of life that forever changed humanity. It could be that the Natufians gave rise to the first farmers. No, it is that they did give rise to the first farmers, but more evidence is needed to solve the mystery. Only how they actually plants and animals, but we know that the pre-pottery Neolithic A, the Natufians, pre-pottery Neolithic B, the Natufians who were domesticating, gave rise to the pottery Neolithic periods, which were fully or mostly agriculture and pastoralism. So they were sedentary when pottery was invented, basically. So yeah, it's answered. No, it's answered. The scientists said that are examining the changes in the use of plants um, between the hunter-gatherer period and the Neolithic way of life. But it still is a Neolithic way of life. Possibly they're talking about before the Neolithic period, Paleolithic, which is characterized by farming, domestication of animals, of food, and establishment of village. The Neolithic, late to mid to late Neolithic way of life, they mean. So yes, we've come to the end. This is another article which we don't need to talk about. We'll talk about some other time. And basically, to summarize, the Natufians were the precursors of farming and agriculture. But they weren't still farming and agriculture, but they most likely that they did establish substantial and permanent homes, which may or not have been used all the time. They may have been semi-nomadic, but it indicates that at least semi-nomadic way of life was used, because if they were nomadic, they would not have made these substantial homes. And they had a very varied diet. And I think I'll end it here. Oh, 37 minutes, not bad. So everyone, how are you all today? I hope I didn't bore you to tears, but this is a period which I also like. Oh, the banana. I'll talk about that. I actually have an article, well, just a small thing of how. Let me see if I can find it. I'll show you wish I knew where I put it. How domesticated plants and wild plants look. I probably don't have it here. No, I don't have it here. But I'll try and find it one day. So yeah. Anyway, uh, the banana. Okay, guys. It's wonderful again to have you guys have being on my my show, and see you next time.